My name is Steve Radden. I'd just like to welcome you all to the Fairy Cloth House Media and Arts Centre on behalf of the Uttlesford Liberal Democrats, and I'm very pleased to have Jason with us here today, who's going to be talking about Brexit. Now, Jason is a former International Trade Negotiator and a passionate anti-Brexit activist, appearing regularly on radio-phony shows such as LBC and Talk Radio. Jason has also appeared on various Brexit-related TV news and discussion programmes, including appearances on the BBC, sharing his experiences and factual insights into the world of trade negotiation, the EU and the WTO. Jason is also, as I'm sure you're all aware, one-third of the Brexit-related Three Blokes in a Pub series on YouTube, which includes an episode on the consequences of a no-deal WTO Brexit. With, and I did check this afternoon, so far 270,000 views to date and growing with the latest news. I first met Jason actually in a similar event in London, I think it was around November time, when Jason kindly offered to come and speak to us here today, so we're very appreciative of Jason coming along. And I think fortunately Theresa May rescheduled the meaningful vote to next Tuesday, which I think makes it speaking today. The evening tonight will take the form of a talk first by Jason, sharing with us his take on Brexit and how it's progressing, and that's obviously a spoiler alert for me, not very well, followed by a question and answer session chaired by Mike Hibbs, who is our local Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate, and will be your host for the evening. So without further ado, may I introduce, please?
I love these microphones when you can walk around, especially when the things are being video, because it really annoys the cameraman. So I'll do that a bit. The middle guy from Three Blokes in a Pub, some people know me as. Does anybody know how Three Blokes in a Pub came about and how we got started? There was a pub involved, yeah. A friend of mine on social media, Graham Hughes, his name is, he rang me up one day and said, look, Jason, he said, nobody's listening to the news anymore. Nobody believes the politicians. They just go down the pub, have a chat about politics, and then Dave tells them how they should vote. And that's what happens. He said, why don't I grab my video camera and come down to London, and we'll sit in the pub with a couple of pints, and we'll talk about Brexit. How it has. Good idea, I'm up for that. Free beer, I like it. Graham's quite a cool guy, actually. He's travelled to every single country on the planet without flying. Over 200 land borders and sea borders he's crossed on cargo ships, and he comes at Brexit from very much a traveller's angle. And he said, Jason, you lived and worked in a dozen different countries, worked for the 5th largest steel company in the world, the largest steel company on the planet, negotiated trade inside and outside the European Union. He said, so with your background coming at this from trade, he said, why don't we go and sit in the bar and we'll talk about our different experiences. Genius. So he's on the train coming down to London, and he said, oh, we should see if Kieran's available. Now, Kieran's a white van man from Essex. He's got a fleet of little white vans and runs a business. So he's in and out of Dover and Calais every single week. He's travelled about 1 million miles in Europe and crossed every border from the Ukraine to the United Kingdom and Gibraltar to the Arctic Circle. So we rang Kieran, he said, yeah, I'm up for that, I'll come along as well. And we did the first episode, and we talked about a no-deal Brexit. What does Brexit actually mean? And we sat, we talked for an hour. We put it onto YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook. We had over 800,000 views of that first episode in 7 days. We're like, holy cow, I've never done anything like this before. It went viral. I think that's what the term is. So we said, well, let's do another one. People like it. They like listening to blokes in pubs, it seems. So we said, okay, well, let's book it in. And we did the best possible kind of Brexit, was episode 2. And then everyone was saying, well, we can just fall back onto WTO rules. We don't need a deal at all from the European Union. Now, I know that's a pretty crap idea. So we said, well, why don't we go to Geneva and ask them in the WTO and talk to some of the leading international trade experts on the planet? So we did. We spent 2 solid days in meetings in Geneva. I'll come on to what we found out there a little bit later, because that's pretty scary. But I wanted to touch on sort of how did we get here with Brexit? Where are we with Brexit? And then what's next with Brexit? And I'll try and do that in 45 minutes. So, how did we get here? Well, we had a referendum back in 2016, some say. I call it a fraudulent, because we know that the Leave EU campaign lied. We know that Vote Leave lied. We know that there was at least 150,000 Russian-linked Twitter accounts influencing the Brexit vote. 150,000 Twitter accounts that has been already proven to have Russian links, tweeting out about Brexit. The lies are unbelievable. The leaders of the Leave EU campaign sat in a parliamentary select committee last year and admitted that they lied to people to get them to vote to leave. The Vote Leave leadership have said, yes, we repeatedly lied. They stole people's data on social media so that they could specifically target them. There's a question about £8.3 million that was donated to Vote Leave, which nobody knows where it came from. Supposedly they've tracked it to the Isle of Man, but Isle of Man, it was illegal for them to contribute to referendum campaign groups because only Gibraltar and United Kingdom companies were allowed to donate. And then there's a question about where did it start? Did it originate in Moscow? And that's where all the fingers are pointing. Then you look at, well, of that £8.3 million from Arron Banks, 2.3 million was a cash donation declared as law. The other 6 million was a loan to a single one-off referendum campaign organisation. How on earth are they ever going to pay that back? That was not declared as a cash donation. They're going to sell a lot of badges for £1 each and make a profit to raise £6 million to pay back as a loan. It should have been declared as cash. So we've got the National Crime Agency investigating an election in the United Kingdom for the first time in our electoral history. The National Crime Agency. The Metropolitan Police have ongoing criminal investigations into all of the Leave campaigns. That's not democracy. Anybody that thinks any of that is democracy and we have to respect the result of that referendum, they don't believe in democracy anymore, they just believe in Brexit. And that's wrong. So that's how we got here, with a fraudulent criminal referendum. The Metropolitan Police have been told to stop investigating the criminal complaints because it's too politically sensitive at the moment until Brexit's finished. What? Seriously, the National Crime Agency, their investigation is ongoing. So yeah, we went to the World Trade Organization, went to Geneva, we spent 2 solid days over there. We met some incredible people, some very senior people in the organization. And we said, look, so what does all this WTO stuff mean, these schedules and things like that? And they said, well, the WTO, the Brexiteers will tell you that 98% of all the trade in the world is done on WTO rules. You might have heard that if you do a bit of debating on social media. It's kind of true, because the WTO terms that we talk about, those are the foundations of all trade and all trade agreements. The fact is, over 90% of UK trade around the world at the moment is under free trade agreements that we enjoy through the European Union. Not just with the EU 27, but with another 70 countries plus around the world, including the United States of America. And we don't have a trade agreement with the USA, but we have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of what they call MRAs, mutual recognition agreements, cooperation agreements, framework agreements, that have been negotiated and signed over the last 30 years between the European Union and the USA. We lose all of those when we leave the EU. Not just with the States, but with the other 60 plus, 70 plus countries and the EU 27. That's what leaving with no deal means. The USA's agreements with the EU, these MRAs, just the list of MRAs runs to 28 pages. Just the list of all the titles of all of the MRAs that we have with the States and cooperation agreements, things like that. All that's gone. Liam Fox was shouting a few weeks ago that he's signed 2 now with the USA, which actually helped them more than it helps us. And that's
including the Faroes?
No, that's the second one, the Faroe Islands. That's a hell of a trade deal, that is. There's a lot of, they've got 50,000 people, the population of the Faroe Islands. But it's okay, we don't need any of that, because we can go and trade with the Commonwealth, right? You know, the average price of a car built in Britain and exported is £20,600. The average GDP per person inside the EU is about $34,000 a year. So they can afford to buy the cars we sell, and that's why 70% of all the cars we build in Britain go to other EU countries. The problem with the Commonwealth is the average GDP per person per year is $3,300 per year. They're not going to buy many £20,000 cars. It's even less than that if you take out Canada, Australia, and some of the bigger countries. So trading with the Commonwealth as a replacement of the EU is just absolutely ridiculous to suggest. Yeah, but look at their growth rates. They've got double-digit economic growth in all these countries. It's like, yeah, they're starting from $100. You get double-digit dollars on that. You've got $10 increase per year. So that's the Brexiteers thing. Oh, you go and trade with all these other countries where they've got all this growth. It's all happening outside the European Union. You think, well, yeah, there's a lot of growth going on in terms of percentages, but when you start from a really low base, it doesn't mean a great deal. So we said to the WTO, they said, well, if you want to trade on the foundations of the WTO terms, not a single country anywhere in the world trades just on WTO terms. But it's the foundation. It's like saying, we all live in houses or apartments, whatever. So say we all live in houses, they've all got foundations. But what we want to do is take the roof off, knock down the windows, take away all the rooms, take away all the walls, and just knock it right back down to the bare foundations and say, yeah, we'll be absolutely fine living here, because 98% of all the other houses have got foundations. That's one of the comparisons they gave us. They said, the other countries, because we were really interested to know what other countries think about Brexit. And they said, well, other countries, imagine you're watching a David Attenborough documentary, you've got a big ball of fish, and all the fish are swimming around really fast, protecting each other from these sharks that are swimming around the outside. These other sharks around the outside are just waiting for a big, fat, juicy fish to swim away from the protection of the European Union. Because they say the EU is protectionist. Yeah, it is. It protects us. Yeah, we're members, paid up members of the European Union. It protects us. And they're waiting for you to swim away. And as soon as you swim away and leave the European Union, they will be coming to take pieces out of your economy as fast as you can say it. And we said, so what's first? And they said, well, the first one that they're talking about is your agri-food sector. And that's not just your farmers, your dairy farmers, your agriculture, arable farmers, and your meat farmers and things. Because each of those different sectors, so take your dairy farmer, he produces a little side industry, as well as his farm and the cows on his farm. So the milk then goes off and creates a butter industry nearby, or a cheese industry nearby making cheese. And then you've got a yogurt company further down the line, and he's making yogurts. And then he's creating a sub-industry making the little plastic pots to put the yogurt into. And then you've got the silver foil lid manufacturer who's down the road creating jobs, putting the lid on the top. Then you've got the cardboard manufacturer and the printing company that print all the marketing on the outside of the yogurt box. He said, so your agri-food sector employs over 3.5 million people in the United Kingdom. And all of our models, whether you get a withdrawal agreement or not, whether you get a deal or not, whether you get a transition period or not, under all our models, your agri-food sector as you know it today will be dead in 18 months to 24 months. That's how quickly they will undermine us. And they said, do you know what's really stupid? The Brexiteers are actually wanting to help these other countries undermine your agri-food sector by lowering all the tariffs to zero. So you can have cheap food imports, which is going to compete with our farmers who are already losing 40 to 60% of their income from the Common Agricultural Policy, the European Union funding. That'll be gone. The government have agreed to fulfill it for another couple of years, but it's gone then. The government will not replace it because they can't afford to. You think, okay, well, it's 3.5 million people, 3.5 million jobs, jobs is jobs is jobs. It's not. It's households. It's people, real people's lives, real people's incomes, real people's mortgage payments. That's what we're talking about. When we talk about losing jobs out of the UK, what if they're only half right in Geneva? And it's not 3.5 million jobs gone. What if they're only a quarter right? How many households losing income at that point? And then when those households have lost income, they're on the state, on universal credit or income support or job seekers allowance or whatever it is going to be called this week. So at the same time, you're costing HM Treasury more money from all these newly unemployed people. At the same time, they're not paying income tax, and they're not paying national insurance, they're not paying PAYE, and they're not, corporation tax isn't going into HM Treasury. So what you've got is bigger bills and less income. That's not a good place to be by any stretch of the imagination. And that was just talking about agri-foods. We then talked about the 700,000 households that work in the UK automotive sector, and we all know what's happening with the automotive sector. Honda is shutting down their plant in Swindon. Toyota are talking about closing down, or just finishing the Corolla, which is built in Derby, is it? So they'll finish this model, but they're not going to build any new models in post-Brexit Britain. We lost the Nissan X-Trail from Sunderland, and that's not being built in post-Brexit Britain. These cars are all being built. They're just not being built in post-Brexit Britain. They're being built in America. They're being built in the new Jaguar Land Rover, the electric ones, being built in Slovakia. The new electric Mini Cooper, that's gone from Oxford. That's not being built over here anymore. And these are gone. These jobs are gone. And it's not just the jobs in the factory. These factory workers, they go down to the local shop in the morning and they buy their drinks and they buy their newspapers and they buy their cigarettes or whatever they buy on the way to work. They buy their lunches in the local Greggs or whatever it is nearby. When those other smaller businesses lose out, and they are losing out already because people have lost confidence, they're not buying as much as they used to buy. This is becoming, or is, a real issue already. If you look on Facebook, there's a group called Brexit Job Losses. They've been totting up the companies and the press releases and announcements that have been going out. We've lost over 213,000 jobs out of the United Kingdom already, and we haven't even left yet. We've just been faffing around all this time. So this withdrawal agreement, I'll come on to that in a little while, because that's quite funny to talk about. It's Theresa May, Dominic Raab, and Stephen Barclay, and David Davis, and what a farce that got up. Oh, now Geoffrey Cox is over there as well, trying to do something else.
It's copies.
That's copies. Would you want to be in the European Union trying to have a 2.5-year negotiation with like 5 or 6 different people, all of whom have got different ideas and different demands and different requests? And, that's crazy. Anyway, we'll come on to that towards the end. Just time. So, yeah, that was the second time I cried over Brexit. I cried my eyes out on the 24th. Yeah, when the results came out. I watched every single result come in. The first one came in as Gibraltar, like 96 or 98% remain. I'm like, yes, I knew that was going to happen. And then you watch the next one, it's Sunderland, 76% leave. And you're like, what the hell? And then you watch another one, another one. I cried on the 24th. The second time I cried was after that first day of meetings when I got back to the Airbnb, got to my bed. And because I can't talk about a lot of the stuff that we hear, because you wouldn't believe how bad other countries are taking this and how seriously the rest of the world is taking this. And they want to destroy the country, just take our economy. Because once they've taken it, they'll take a loss for a couple of years. For several years, I was head of strategic market planning for a very large steel company. And we'd pick another country's industry, say an automotive industry, and we want to sell them flat steel for the body panels. We'd find out who else was selling in there first. What did they do to get those contracts? What can we now do to leapfrog them and lose money, potentially, for the first 2 to 3 years? But once we've destroyed that competitor, we've then got that market all to ourselves for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we work with 15-year strategic plans, as do other countries, when they're building this kind of solution for themselves. Liam Fox says we can get all these new trade deals, we can just roll them over. He's consulted on 4 on the Department of International Trade website. One's the USA, who opposed our schedule of tariffs we filed with the WTO. Australia and New Zealand, both of whom have also opposed our schedule of tariffs we filed with. And the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is sort of Japan and some of the Asian islands, Asian states, who told us right at the beginning, well, we've just signed this massive trade deal with the largest single market on the planet. We need to build on that and build that relationship for the next 5 or 6 years at least, before we even start talking to you about trade. Those are the 4 consultations that Liam Fox has got on the Department of International Trade's website. And who's going to negotiate all these new trade deals? Liam Fox, one of the first things he did was hire 100 negotiators. Yeah? And once he hired them, because not many people wanted to apply, he found 100 of them, and then he had to spend £2.9 million with Deloitte, sending them on training courses to be trade negotiators. They said in Geneva, you've got a whole bunch of these civil servants virtually living here in Geneva, and they said, these kids, he said, the problem we've got with these kids, and he called them kids, he said, because they're straight out of uni, fast track through civil service, never negotiated trade anywhere in the world before. They said, the problem we've got is these kids are so inexperienced, they do not even know the right questions to be asking us. They don't even know the right questions to be asking. The WTO is an independent organisation, it's got 164 members all around the world, so we've taken back control from 27 and we've given it to 164 instead. Genius. So, where we're at with that, it's just awful. You look at Canada, they've got over 800 experienced trade negotiators. The United States of America's got over 1,200 experienced trade negotiators. We've got 100 inexperienced people, and we're about to lose 70 trade deals around the world with 70 different countries, and the largest trade agreement that exists on the planet. We are so not ready for Brexit as a country. Even with the withdrawal agreement, if that gets signed and we get a transition agreement for the next 12 months, all that does is kick the can down the road for 2 years. Because then we face exactly where we are today in 2 years' time. Because trade agreements take the comprehensive free trade agreements that we're talking about, that we need to replace the ones we used to have and we enjoy today, take anything from 5 to 10 years and some longer. 70 countries, 5 years at a time, and we've got a fraction of the staff and the teams that we need in the civil service. There's just no way, not in our lifetimes, we would ever get back to exactly where we are. Probably not in my daughter's lifetime either. She wasn't allowed to vote in the referendum, by the way. She was 19, she could vote for London Mayor, she could vote for local authority councillors, but she couldn't vote in the referendum because she happened to be born in the wrong country. Back in 1997. She was 19 years old, she wasn't allowed to vote every year. She lived here now for 15 years. She works here, pays taxes here, been to college here, been to high school here. So yeah, the franchise was messed up. How we've done that. Okay, so back to WTO. Yeah, that's not a pretty picture. And yeah, I cried for the second time over Brexit that night. Then we went to Brussels to talk about Article 50. And we work under what's called Chatham House rules when we go over through Blokes and do the fact-finding mission. So we can talk about what was discussed, but we can't name the individuals, and nobody usually knows who else we're meeting in the town or the city we're at. So they can talk very, very frankly, very, very openly with us when we talk to them. How many people in the room have read Article 50, the actual page itself? Well, there's a few hands coming up, probably more in this room than were in Westminster when they gave Theresa May permission to vote for it. The guy, I swear they hadn't read it. It's half a page of A4. It's 5 paragraphs. The third paragraph is pretty clear, very clear. The third paragraph says, 2 years after the member states notify their leaving, all the treaties cease to apply to that member state in question. All the treaties cease to apply. That's what Brexit means. All the treaties cease to apply. So we went to Brussels, and the first meeting we had was in the office of the President of the European Council. We went across to the Parliament after that and talked to some people in Guy Verhofstadt's team. We went across to the Commission after that and talked to some people over in Barnier's team. And they all used the same 2 words. When we asked them the question, what does it mean, this Brexit in this Article 50? And they all used the same 2 words to answer. They didn't know who else we were seeing. They said, well, everything stops. Well, what do you mean everything stops? They said, well, everything, all the treaties cease to apply, therefore everything stops. They said, well, expand. They said, well, you've got this Project Fear thing going on in Britain at the moment, about aeroplanes not being able to fly. He said, you've got 750 treaties between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and they all cease to apply to Britain. One of those treaties is something called EASA, which is the European Aviation Safety Agency. And what they do is they allow us, as a member state, to certify engineers to be able to fix planes. And put more air in the tyres when it's just landed at Heathrow, or put more fuel in. You've got a different qualification for putting fuel in planes. The engineers who actually put the sellotape around the wings to stop them falling off at the airport, he's got a different level of qualification. And we're able to certify our engineers are qualified to be able to carry out these tasks, like in any job. When the treaty ceases to apply, our agency that's accredited our engineers is no longer valid in the EU 27. And if you've got engineers who are not accredited to be able to fix planes, those planes are not accredited as safe to fly in EU airspace. That's going to cause you a problem in Britain, unless you renegotiate it, which we could. And they're talking about renegotiating the EASA agreement. In fact, the Department of Exiting the EU said we're looking for somebody specific. Last year, this was, I think, June, July. We're looking for an experienced negotiator to negotiate the new aviation agreement with the European Union. No aviation experience needed, it said on the advert. I kid you not. So we lose the EASA as one of those 750 treaties that cease to apply. He said another one is the Single Skies Agreement. A Single Skies Agreement allows your air traffic control in Britain to link up, you've got a username and a password that links up with other EU countries' air traffic control systems. And that username and password gets cancelled at 11:01 PM on the 29th of March. Because that's another one of those 700. We can renegotiate it. He said, sure we can. We can sit down and renegotiate that and make sure that we've still got access to the European air traffic control systems. And he said, but then we've got the Open Skies Agreement, which is another one of those 750 treaties, and that's the international agreement that allows American aircraft to land in EU countries, and South American, and South African, and Asian planes. So all these international planes currently have an agreement to fly into EU countries. They said, but you can renegotiate that too. That's another one of the 750 agreements that we need to renegotiate. He said, then you've got things like your driving licenses won't be valid anymore, clearly, because the people that licensed your truck drivers, because you've got different levels of license for driving a motorcycle, a car, a big truck. If you're driving a big HGV, then you need a specific license that's valid in the EU 27. Currently, British licenses are, but that's another treaty of those 750. But you can renegotiate that as well. He said your truck drivers will be able to drive on the ferry, but it won't be legal to drive off the other end. He said, then you've got your services and your insurance passporting rights that also cease to apply, because that's what Article 50 says, paragraph 3, all treaties cease to apply. So British insurance companies won't be able to insure that truck driver to drive in France, unless he gets a green card, which is another several £1,000s. So then, he said, but then you've got insurance on the goods in the back, and that insurance won't be valid either, so you have to get French insurance to insure the goods as they travel through the other EU 27. He said, when the Eurostar train comes across, your train driver's no longer qualified to drive in the EU, so you won't get platformed. When your ferries come across and your cargo ships come across to Rotterdam, you radio in for a pilot boat to come out. He won't come out to see you because the treaty ceased to apply. He said, but it's okay, you can renegotiate that too. Can we really renegotiate 750 treaties that we're losing with the European Union in a space of 2.5 years? Clearly not. Especially with this bunch of incompetent cowards that we've got in Westminster at the moment. They spent 2.5 years faffing around. The first 3 things they should have done in the first 3 months of the negotiations is protect citizens' rights. Secondly, here's the financial obligations that we owe, fine, agreed. And thirdly, make damn sure there's never a border put back on the island of Ireland. And that, for me, is probably the most fundamental thing. And it should be easy, it's a given. They should have done all of that in the first 3 months. 2.5 years later, or 2 and a bit years later, we'd be at a point where we've negotiated a lot of those 750 treaties, and we'd be in quite a good, strong position. But the useless incompetence that we've got in David Davis first, then Dominic Raab, now Stephen Barclay, Geoffrey Cox, Theresa May, Ollie Robbins, they're all back and forth asking for different things from the EU, all contradicting each other, and they've made an absolute farce of this Brexit negotiation. And the EU are pulling their hair out. We've got back channels over there, so we talk to them regularly. And they said, just this week, we still don't have any draft text to send to our lawyers to get legal advice on, can we do this or not? Still. We haven't even given them a piece of paper saying, look, this is what we want, these are our demands. They're just completely incompetent. So, one of the other episodes we did on the Three Blokes was talking about medicines. Because, well, the other treaties that we lose is the border controls and customs. We have to put in customs agents to inspect trucks and things, and we're expecting backlogs of vehicles both sides of the channel, in Calais and over here. I don't know if you saw the news this week, Calais had been running some tests, some trials to see what it would be like. 40 kilometres yesterday. 40 kilometres. The UK government are talking about shutting down half the M20 for 17 miles out of Dover. And then they've got an overflow truck park on the M26, 10 miles of the M26 they're shutting down. And they've got an overflow truck park at Manston Airport where they've reserved space, and that's where the overflow trucks will be. 12,000 trucks a day go through Dover. 12,000. And the government's pilot test, when they wanted to see how it would all work, they used 98 vehicles to test it for 12,000. So one of the other, I wanted to touch on that very briefly because there will be backups and it will be difficult to get things in the country. I mean, the government, you may have heard, is stockpiling 6 weeks worth of medicines, 6 weeks worth of processed food. Did you hear that? They're actually in the government's technical notices, they talk about it. They also instructed the RAF to put emergency plans in place to fly food parcels and medicine packages around the United Kingdom. They appointed a minister for food supplies last year. That's a minister for rationing. In peacetime, in the 5th largest economy in the world, we've now got a ministry for rationing. Armed forces, reservists, are now on standby to be called out next month and the month after that. Police forces across the country have been told to cancel the holidays for their staff and police across the UK. The government are on a war footing, people. We're shutting down major pieces of infrastructure, calling out the army reserves in peacetime for what? There still isn't any benefit of Brexit. And not only is there not a benefit of Brexit, we talked with some of the leading drug manufacturers in the UK. We talked to GlaxoSmithKline, we talked to AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, all the big four, if you like. And they consult with the government on a regular basis, as to haulage companies in other industry sectors, and they go into DEX-EU, Department for Exiting the European Union, they sit down with the Minister, Secretary of State, this is what we see in our industry. What you need to do is stockpile 6 months worth of medicines, but not just the medicines, you need to stockpile the ingredients as well so we can continue to manufacture, because we know we will not be able to get it in the country. Do you know what the government said we'll do? Yeah, we can't afford that. The NHS doesn't have enough money to stockpile 6 months worth of medicines, so we're going to stockpile 6 weeks worth instead. 6 weeks worth, instead of 6 months. Now, one of the people who actually was in the room consulting with DEX-EU, she said when they went in, they put a single piece of A4 paper with a non-disclosure agreement saying they're not allowed to talk about what goes on in that meeting, and they had to sign them before the meeting could start. So they're on the desks, one piece of paper, they all had to sign it. I said, oh man, you can let me have a copy of that. I'll redact out your names, obviously, and all the identification stuff, but I'd love to see a copy of that detail. They said, no, we weren't allowed to keep one. I don't know how many of you have signed contracts where you did not been allowed to keep a copy. And then these pieces of paper were collected up off the desk and then handed to somebody outside the room before the meeting could even start. The lack of transparency in Westminster is unbelievable. She said, then the meeting started, she said, I told the government, she said, my daughter's ill. She said she takes specific medicine that comes from Italy, the only place in the world it comes from. And it comes in freely at the moment. She can order it from, go to the doctor, get a repeat prescription, and medicine's there a week later. She said, I know I need 6 months of this medicine in the UK for my daughter. So she's gone away, she bought herself a new freezer for home, and a new fridge for home for her daughter's medicine. Went to her GP and said, look, I need 6 months prescriptions, please, for this medicine, because I need to get it brought into the country now to protect my daughter in the future, post-Brexit. And the GP said, I can't give you 6 months worth. NHS can't afford it. So she went to a private GP, got her prescriptions, and she's bought the medicines anyway, to keep her daughter alive. Some medicines you can't even stockpile for 6 weeks, or 6 months. The NHS are not even, the government are not even supporting what's been demanded by industry. 6 weeks of medicines. And the advice from the experts is, your pharmacies are going to run out. I did one of these talks, and there was a lady in the audience, and she said, Jason, can you guarantee I'm not going to die because of Brexit? I said, well, how do you mean? So he said, yeah, I've got an immune problem, and I take 6 different medications a day, you know, and she will die if she doesn't get the medications. 3 of those medications have a 7-day potency. So if you take them on day 8 or day 9 or day 10, they don't work. And what do you say to somebody like that? You can't stockpile these medicines even for 6 weeks, never mind 7 days or 6 months. It's the horror stories that I've heard traveling around Europe on talking to people about the real life effects of Brexit. It's just devastating. It really, really is. I think diabetics and insulin is quite a big issue. We make 2 types of insulin in the United Kingdom for animals, not for people. All of our human insulin for diabetics is imported from Europe. 50% of it comes from Denmark, and the rest is from other EU countries. Denmark are trying to stockpile some over there, but that's another thing you can't stockpile for a longer period of time. If you think we're bringing stuff in, a lot of it is temperature sensitive. So it's in the back of a truck, refrigerated truck, and it sits there and it's coming in. And these little batteries and generators don't last forever. You know, if your truck's stuck at a border for 7 days, and the truck's only designed to store this stuff in the back for 2 days, we're in so much trouble I can't even begin to explain how bad it is. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Well, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle once said, through Sherlock Holmes, he said, when you've eliminated all of the impossible, the only thing that remains must be the answer, however improbable it might seem. So the government at the moment, they're going to vote next week, but they've rejected Theresa May's withdrawal agreement out of hand because of the backstop. When we talk about the backstop, we can do that in a minute. Ask me about it in the Q&A. So the withdrawal agreement's gone. We've run out of time to extend Article 50 because we've got the European Parliament elections on May 26th. And the minimum time for a referendum in the UK, according to the Electoral Commission, is about 10 weeks. Before that referendum campaign can actually start for a people's vote or a second vote, whatever, you've got anything from 4 to 8 weeks of parliamentary time to argue about what the question's going to be, who's going to be allowed to vote, and all those sort of things. So they'll bounce the legislation around, go up to the House of Lords, back down again. That'll take them a month at least. So you're talking 14 to 18 weeks. Lord Andrew Stummel reckons 18 weeks. We've got 3 weeks before we leave. 18 weeks takes us past the European parliamentary elections. If we're still a member of the European Union during May 26th, we are obliged to take part in that. Otherwise, we are removing an EU citizen's rights to be able to vote for their elected representatives, including the 3 million EU citizens that live and work here at the moment. So if you extend Article 50, we've got to run parliamentary EP elections just for them and for the rest of us. That's going to be really awkward, isn't it? Especially with everything that's going on. Not for us. So that would be really awkward, and I don't think the EU would extend Article 50 past that point anyway. They've said it's done and dusted by July 2nd, July 1st, which is when Parliament sits. So extending Article 50 is going to be gone. No withdrawal agreement, no deal will be ruled out next week because that's too diabolical to even consider. Extending Article 50 on, so what's left? Well, revoke Article 50. It's the only thing we can do unilaterally, and we can do it at any point between now and the 29th of March. Theresa May, all she has to do is go across to Brussels and say, you know that letter? And we're back at this. John Kerr, who actually wrote it, Lord Kerr, who actually wrote Article 50, I sat with him. He said it is that simple. And the ECJ, thank you very much, the Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice, they ruled in December that we can unilaterally revoke it. We don't need permission of the other EU 27. There are some conditions around it saying, yeah, but once you withdraw it, you can't invoke it again the next month. You can't keep it backwards and forwards. Now, my recommendation would be, let's revoke it. Put Brexit on pause for at least 2 years. Let the National Crime Agency finish what they're doing, finish their investigations. Let the Met Police finish their criminal investigations. Put the right people in prison. Prosecute the ones that lied and broke the law. And then at that point, we know what Brexit looks like now. We've got 585 pages of withdrawal agreement saying this is what Brexit is. All the treaties cease to apply, and you've got 20 months to renegotiate 750 different treaties before the end of the transition period. So we can put it on pause for a couple of years, and then have the people's vote, then have the referendum, or not, just stay in. That's my preference, but I mean, if I was writing the ballot paper for a people's vote, it would be, should we remain in the European Union, or should we stay in the European Union? I don't think the Brexiteers would go for that, though. Okay, don't forget to ask about the backstop, if you want to talk about that in the Q&A. I've rambled on for a bit, so I will pause here, and we'll take some questions, if that's all right.
Thank you very much, Jason.
We have a chair, Q&A chair. So thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
So we have the first question in the front row, and then we'll take the second question and then the third question.
That was very chilling at times. Are we wasting our time with this then?
No, definitely not. Go there. Tell the government that we demand a final say on this, because nobody told us what we were voting on in 2016. I thought I knew Brexit was going to be a bad idea, and we should definitely stay in. My first call into a radio show was to Ian Dale, actually, on LBC, back in January 2012. And I was talking to him about Article 50 and what it meant at that point. And since 2012, we've been doing this more and more and more. And we've definitely got to have this second vote. I don't think there's time to have it now, and because we're out of time. We've got 3 weeks left. The only option that's viable and realistic for the government to do is to revoke Article 50. And unless they extend it for 2 years, but then we've still got all the uncertainty. We don't know what's happening. It gives companies and businesses 2 more years to get out of the country and relocate to another country inside the European Union. And they will go, and they are going. The Institute of Directors just did a recent survey. It said 29% of British businesses have already relocated staff and are talking about relocating the rest of their business out. It's a third of all businesses in the UK, or members of the IOD. It's a lot. So no, definitely not wasting our time with the People's March. Get there, see you on the 23rd. It's going to be really sunny, I've ordered it.
I just wanted to ask a bit about the actual procedure for revoking Article 50. May is totally obdurate. What pressure can we put on her, or can Parliament revoke Article 50, or are we stuck until somebody locks her in the room and...
I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't think that she would go voluntarily to withdraw it, because she dug herself such a big hole with the Lancaster House speech way back at the beginning. She drew all those red lines. She didn't understand what Article 50... I honestly do not believe she read Article 50 before she went over and wrote it. And when she made that Lancaster House speech, she had no idea about the Good Friday Agreement, the single market, what the difference was with the customs union. I honestly believe she didn't know what she was doing. So I think she will need to be pressured next week. This week coming on Tuesday, there's votes on her withdrawal agreement. I think that's going to get destroyed. The following day, there'll be a vote on, okay, are we going to stop a no-deal Brexit happening? And if the MPs vote in a majority, which I think they will, to say that we definitely don't want no deal, that's then off the table. The only things left are extending Article 50, and the EU 27 have said, look, you can only have it if you've got a damn good reason. Yeah, if it looks like you're going to get the withdrawal agreement past Parliament within that extension period of a month or whatever, then fine. Otherwise, we won't. And they told us the same thing. Yesterday, Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, he was furious, saying, look, we still got no text to discuss. Today, Michel Barnier said, okay, well, if you want to reopen the withdrawal agreement, then what we can do is change the backstop so it doesn't apply to all of the United Kingdom. It only applies to Northern Ireland, which is where they started 9 months ago. And Theresa May rejected it. So the only thing that's left, however improbable it seems, is that Parliament will put pressure onto the government and on Theresa May to get her ass across to Brussels as quickly as possible. And I think if she doesn't go, she'll lose probably at least 15 members of her cabinet. And if they all go out of the cabinet or resign, She is up the creek without a paddle. She's got to resign if she revokes it, and if we come out with no deal, she's going to have to resign anyway. So her career is dead.
Yeah, I think what you were talking just said, I thought the one thing that sums up her attitude is Brexit means Brexit. Well, you know, it's
And we're going to make a success of it.
Titanic success. Nobody knew then what Brexit was, and people are learning now. I just really wanted to say I'm lucky enough, I live very locally, but a lot of people here might not have seen Channel 4 News tonight, and I do urge you to go home and look at it on iPlayer. They've done a deep investigation into Aaron Banks and the financing, and some deeply horrifying things emerged from that, including how the Labour League campaign, in fact, was pretty much financed by Aaron Banks, and yet they seem not to even know that they were. So I do urge people to go home and watch Channel 4 News tonight.
Okay. Noted. Thank you.
Question at the back.
When are you going to give this talk to Parliament? Or is it fake news?
I do a lot. If only they listen. Some of them are. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with some Lib Dem Lords, and we were talking about how we can pressure Vince Cable or Tom Brake or any Lib Dem MP to stand up and put forward this suggestion. Look, we've eliminated everything else. The only thing that's left is to revoke Article 50, because nobody is seriously even discussing it in Westminster. I think nobody should be, as far as I can see, because there's no other options. So we'll see next week what happens with that. I debate a lot of ERG MPs, John Hayes up in Lincolnshire in the Leave area. I had a great discussion with him in a room like this. Debating Simon Hall about the people's vote and whether we should have a second referendum or not. He's a Dorset MP. I did 178 of these talks last year, all across the country, from Edinburgh to Penzance and from Suffolk across to Wales. Been around the block. We talked to a lot of members of Parliament and also in the Lords, because the Lords are a lot more influential than we give them credit for, I think. I've hated them always because they're unelected. They're the unelected, faceless bureaucrats.
So I've got two questions. So one, do you disclose the MPs that you've spoken to? So have you spoken to Mark Prisk, for example?
I can't. Sorry, I'd love to be able to. Because we work under Chatham House rules, it's like as soon as I name one, I trust that people won't be so candid with us in the future. So we've got to maintain that trust.
And the second one, can you talk about the backstop?
So, hands up who understands the backstop. Kind of thought that. Why is it important? Who knows why it's important? Good Friday.
So that's an EU formulated treaty, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, the three blokes we went across, we filmed in Belfast at Stormont. We sat down with one of the authors of the Good Friday Agreement. We went down to Dublin, and we went to a pub on the border, literally on the border. And you look out, you can see the roadway across outside, and the border's just there. Yeah. So we went to some cattle sheds, and the border goes right down the middle of the cattle shed. 20 years of peace they've had as a result of that agreement. The amount of work and effort that went into that. People don't know how much involvement the EU have had in that. They put together the Peace 1 programme, the Peace 2 programme, they're on the third round of the programme now. They're building infrastructure, cross-border, they're building communities. I mean, literally, there was a field outside the pub, and the sheep on this side were Northern Irish, and the sheep on this side of the field were Southern Irish. And in order for animals to cross the border post-Brexit, they'll need a sanitary check and a phytosanitary check to make sure they haven't got foot and mouth disease and everything else. And you're going to do that for every time the sheep goes, nah, there's a piece of grass over there. Honestly, you can't put a fence in there because they've got to have all these veterinary checks. Now, there's not enough vets across the entire European Union to do all of these checks around the United Kingdom post-Brexit. We certainly don't have enough. DEFRA are training 450 vets. You know how long it takes to train a vet? I forget, it was 7 or 9 years, 7 years. And they've only just started. 450 they're training, and there's not going to be enough anyway. So in this pub, there's a bunch of old guys who we're talking with, and actually before that, when we first landed in Belfast, the taxi driver is former Ulster Defence Regiment. He was manning the border back in the day. And he said that as we're going through, 20 minutes we're off the plane, he said, what are you doing over here? I said, we're coming to the border, talk about Brexit. He went, oh my God. And he said, we're going through the right part of Belfast now, if you want any AK-47s or any plastic explosive or stuff. He said, there's a warehouse down the road here, most of us know where it is. You could knock on the door, have a chat, and then you can go in and buy anything you want. In terms of weaponry, it is there right now. And it is, anybody can just go and get it, if you know who you are. We had conversations with one of the real IRA commanders, and 6 months ago, that must be March. It must be 6 or 7 months ago. They dug out all the maps of where all the weapons caches were along the border posts, and he told us that 6 months ago. And we talked about it in one of the episodes. They've been taken it and they've given it to the cells, the IRA cells, that are ready to start attacking the border posts the moment they put them up. And in the part of these old guys, they said, look, we're all farmers around here, we've all got shotguns to protect our animals and stuff. He said, if you stick a camera on that post over there, like they're talking about, he said, we'll shoot it down. He said, you stick another one up, we'll shoot it down the next time. He said, you cannot enforce this border with technology. And he said, if you put a guy with a clipboard on that border who stops a truck and says, I just want to check the paperwork and just make sure what's in the back matches up to your paperwork here, he'll be a target. Not for the farmers, but for the paramilitaries that are there right under the surface. The real IRA, the new IRA they call themselves, they've been recruiting. They reckon they've recruited 100 new recruits ready for Brexit. And these people are there, right under the surface. And they will shoot a customs agent. So you need to have police on the border to protect the customs agent. And if you put police on the border, you need the army there to protect them. And you're right back to the troubles where we were, all that time ago. 20 years of peace, and we're giving it up for what? And I assure, excuse me?
Boris Johnson.
It is absolutely vital that we don't go back to any infrastructure on that border. In fact, we've actually made it illegal. The EU Withdrawal Act that received royal assent in Westminster last year in July, section 10.2b specifically says you cannot you cannot put any infrastructure on the border to check, measure, or control the goods crossing your border. It's illegal for us to put any new checkpoints over there. You think, wow, if it's illegal, always going to leave the border wide open? Is that taking back control of your borders by leaving them wide open? No, it's just not possible.
And we have to have the control.
Yeah.
Under international treaties, we must measure what's going both ways.
Yeah, a good point.
This is what I was going to ask.
I should have mentioned that
Why
earlier.
would the United Kingdom want to do that? Why do we have to do that? Surely we'll just sit back and say, you know, the EU wants to do it, and they may want to do it to protect their own trade. Why should we do it? I'm playing the devil's advocate here.
I get it.
You get the point.
Within these schedules that we filed with the WTO, these are tariff schedules basically, and you have what are called tariff rate quotas and country-specific quotas and all sorts of different ones. So if you've got, say we need in the United Kingdom for our manufacturing support, we need 200,000 tonnes of a particular grade of steel every year, making radiators or something. But we can produce 100,000 tonnes a year in our own manufacturing bases over here. So what we would do is we would set in our schedule of tariffs a very, very low import tariff on the first 100,000 tonnes that come into the country, and then a very, very high tariff on anything above that to protect our 100,000 tonnes of manufacturers. And then we're happy, everyone's happy. So that schedule of tariffs that we filed, and steel's a good example actually, there's over 3,300 different grades of steel that we trade, and that is one product nomenclature, or one product group, out of the 4,500 product nomenclature that we need to file our schedule of tariffs for, and our tariff rate quotas. So 4,500 product groups, one of those groups has got 3,300 grades. We need to analyse how much of that one we need, how much we can make ourselves, and how much we need imported, and then we set what the tariffs are. And Liam Fox was too lazy to bother doing any of that work in the last 2.5 years. So what he did was, he went to the EU, copied theirs, which protects 27 different countries' manufacturing systems, which is all different because it works for the EU as a whole, not for individual countries. And copied and pasted it onto British government letterhead paper and sent it to Geneva. When they got it, they laughed. They said, look, he's so lazy, he didn't even change the currency symbol from euros to pounds. And I kid you not, he didn't. They're available, you can look at them. The first one he said it is exactly the same as the EU 28s. And that clearly won't work for the UK, because these orange groves and lemon groves that we've got. Because these schedules, this is why so many countries around the world have said, look, that's not acceptable. If you try and trade on those tariff schedules, you'll find yourself in dispute. But where I'm going with this is, in order to be able to apply the right tariff, you have to be able to check, measure, and control the value and the volume of the goods that cross your borders, so you know which tariff to apply. Is it the first 100,000 tonnes of imports, or is it more than that? Do we put a higher tariff on this bit? And if we have no border controls, then, and we're not checking it, measuring it, controlling it, the volume and the value, then other countries won't know how much to buy and sell from us and what prices to charge. And if you can't do that, you can't trade. Also, if you don't control your borders, as you say, you're outside of other international treaties, and you won't be able to get a new international trade deal, free trade agreement with anybody, anywhere. Why? Because you'll be at the WTO in dispute with so many different people trying to sell you stuff or buy stuff from you. Because all the other countries, they've already filed their schedules. It took Russia 18 years to get approval from the other WTO members, 18 years to get their schedules approved. And we just put ours in, and we've had 18 countries already appeal them. So you can't trade like that. And if you're in dispute with the WTO, then of course you're not going to be negotiating new trade deals with anybody else because nobody really trusts you. And who would be sent to do our negotiating over that? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, basically, on the Ireland border would be like a conduit through which goods would pass to and from the United Kingdom, obviously different from what our requirements are.
Could be legal, could be illegal.
Enforce our own requirements.
Yeah.
Michel Barnier this evening seemed to indicate that there would basically, that England and Scotland and Wales could stay in, or could leave, and then Ireland. Is he basically looking at a united Ireland again?
Almost certain. I can see that happening within 4 years of Brexit. They'll have a referendum, because if the Good Friday Agreement goes, then they'll have a by-country referendum in the north and the south. 88% of the south want to stay in the European Union, clearly. And the north just will say, well, do you know what, we don't want to go back to the Troubles, because they remember what it's like. The Northern Irish paramilitaries, they're still there. Arlene Foster, the chief head of the DUP, the DUP opposed the Good Friday Agreement. They did not want the Belfast Agreement to happen. They wanted to keep the border there, they wanted to keep the Troubles going. There's photographs just from last year with her hanging out with the leaders of Northern Irish paramilitary organisations that are currently shooting teenagers' knees out. Last year, the Northern Irish Justice Department had to put out a series of television adverts. This is the government putting out, Justice Department, putting out adverts to parents saying, when you get these little notes saying, bring your child for punishment to this address at this time on this day, don't take them, report it to the authorities. But they're so afraid of these paramilitaries. Parents were taking 16 and 17-year-olds that had maybe stolen some cash from a shop, a corner shop or something, or they'd broken one of the gaming machines, because the paramilitary, they would still run all the gaming machines, all the alcohol, the tobacco in that part of the world, and a lot of the corner shops. So if they can identify a kid, then they order him to be brought to them, and they are shooting their knees out, kneecapping him. Last year, currently in the United Kingdom, this is happening, and the Justice Department are begging parents not to take their kids out to get beaten up. This is like now, or last year, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. But this is the paramilitary, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask, going back to the open border in Ireland, is there also a rule in WTO where you can't give preferential access to one country over another? So would we be in breach of that in that instance as well? Because we would have an open border with the EU, we wouldn't have it with, say, Mexico or the US or whatever.
Also true, also true. If you look at the government's technical notices for banking financial services, one of the things it suggests is that we open up the United Kingdom market to banks in the EEA, the EU27 and EFTA countries, to be able to have full, complete access to the United Kingdom market. You think, well, okay, so if I'm a British bank right now in Britain, post-Brexit, I can only trade in Britain unless I relocate to Frankfurt, Dublin, or somewhere else in the next 3 years, and then I can access the largest one on the planet and the EU, and the UK rather. But what they didn't even consider is exactly that most favoured nation clause that says if we do that for the EEA banks, then we also have to do it for Alpha Bank in Moscow, and Citibank in New York, and every other banking institution in the world. And so it'd be a free-for-all in Britain. And nobody would want to be based here or stay here. So yeah, that's a good solid rule.
Thanks.
Let's take it down there. Barbara, we'll come to you in a minute.
Sorry, so
assuming next Tuesday that Theresa May's deal is rejected
Again.
and assuming that the no Brexit, the no deal Brexit is rejected, your suggestion is that either Article 50 needs to be revoked, or potentially, as the EU has suggested, that we have a 21-month extension. Either of those two scenarios takes us past the 22nd, 23rd of May. Is it therefore, in your opinion, inevitable that we will be participating in European elections?
Westminster is so unpredictable at the moment. Ask me that question again on the 22nd of March, because I think that's the deadline. She's got this week coming up, and there's a European Council meeting when we go over and we say, look, we're out of time, we're out of luck, we've got out of agreements, we've got nothing to do. That's when I think she'll ask the European Council to say, can we withdraw Article 50 at that point? 21st, 22nd, if she's even out of the room. So I think that's when we'll find out.
But if we do withdraw it, then presumably we have to have European elections.
Yes, yeah. And if we extend it past May 26th, we have to have European elections. And that's the last council meeting. So that's where we have to make a decision at that point and either ask for the extension then. They'll go away and talk about it the following day and say, should we do it? What have they given us to extend it? How long we can extend it for? So time is ticking. And if we haven't done it by the 22nd, when Theresa May goes over to Brussels, then what? We've got very little time, because before we can revoke Article 50, we still need to repeal the EU Withdrawal Act from July last year that has got a specific date on it saying we leave the European Union. Now, they could do it in a day in Parliament if they really pull their fingers out. They could. Whether they will or not, I don't know.
Come back to you, but I'm going to take Barbara first.
I just wanted to ask you about immigration, because so many people are alleged to have voted to leave because of immigrants. Yet, I believe we're not actually counting the people who leave, so we don't know how many immigrants there are here.
The Migration Observatory at Oxford University have done a series of studies on this, as have the Migration Advisory Committee in Westminster. And if you look at what's called the foreign-born, they call them rather than immigrants in these studies, we got the numbers right. 14% of the UK population, when this last study was done, is what they call foreign-born, or immigrants. So 14% are foreign-born. Of that 14%, only 27% were from the European Union. So that means fewer than 4 in 100 people in the United Kingdom are from the European Union. This is this mass immigration that we've got. 4 in 100 people in Britain. That's what the stats show. You know? And you think, every year we issue more visas under a points-based visa system from the Home Office to non-EU migrants coming over here, which we've been able to control for decades. You know, A, the EU migration isn't an issue. B, if we wanted to lower immigration, then we could just stop issuing so many visas. But the fact is, not enough people came to the United Kingdom from the European Union to support our economy. We had to bring in a couple of 100,000 from the rest of the world as well, on top. Because not enough people were coming to help work here. So immigration, yes, it was sold, it was part of the lies. It was like, Turkey's joining the European Union, and 70 million Turks are coming to live here. And 29 million Bulgarians and Romanians are going to come and live in your basement. Yeah, they call us Project Fear. The whole Leave campaign was based on fear. And now they started again. I don't know if you noticed, if you're Remainers, you probably haven't been targeted yet. But the Leave campaigns are getting ready for this people's vote. You can see it's coming as well. And they're already putting out the lies about the EU army. And I was talking to a guy, they're going to conscript our 16 and 18-year-olds into national service. It's just unbelievable that the lies are still going on. It really is. Sorry.
Actually, I was going to say something about the European Parliament, because there was a suggestion fairly recently that was mooted that they might leave our MEPs in place. For some short transition period. But I believe that's been thrown out as an idea as well.
Yeah, there's 6 or 7 different types of ideas. One that was mooted in Westminster was, okay, well, if we don't take part, but we're still in the EU, what we'll just do is we'll pick some MPs, members of Parliament, our Parliament in Westminster, and we'll send them over to do the MEPs' jobs. Unelected. Yeah. So that was one of the other suggestions that they made. Another one was to keep all of the MEPs sitting, all 753 of them, to keep them sitting until the extension of Article 50 is over, but then that's in breach of the EU Constitution. We have 73. Unless a couple more have been arrested. There's about 753. That's interesting actually, because we've got almost 1 in 10 of the members of the European Parliament, and yet we're 1 in 28 of the countries that were there. MEPs' numbers are allocated by population size, so the population of the country. So Germany have got the most because they've got more people. France have got second, and then we've got the third most MEPs in the European Parliament. We were punching above our weight for a tiny island on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. But not only do we have our 73, we also sat down with the Irish, because we're friends with them. And we sat down and we'd get their 11 MEPs to vote the same way we were going to vote. So we'd actually go across to the European Parliament with more clout and more power than France, which is a bigger, more powerful, bigger economy, more people, and we were so punching above our weight. Just look at things like the CE mark on your electronics, say it's safe to use. You know where that started? The whole British kite mark. You know, we had so much influence over European legislation. And then they say, yeah, but the EU's make all our laws. You know, it's another one of the lies. If they make all our laws, why have we been paying 650 members of Parliament and over 1,000 people to sit in the House of Lords to make laws just for Britain? You know, if the EU's making our laws, what have we been paying these guys for?
And you take Steve, then Antoinette, and then gentleman.
There's been some discussion around whether a Norway plus type model could pass the Commons and be a majority. So I was wondering, first of all, what do you think of that model? And secondly, what do you think the likelihood of that passing through the Commons?
50% of Norway's exports to the European Union is energy, oil and gas, something the EU needs. There's not much we produce in Britain that the EU really needs. And the reason that Norway got such a good deal, with no say, is because they produce stuff the EU needs. It'd be much easier for British manufacturers just to relocate into the European Union and go to trade with them continuously. Norway are part of Schengen, so you've got unlimited immigration, unlimited, uncontrolled, was it the phrases they use, massive immigration. But that doesn't happen either, really. So I can't see Norway plus working for us. The other one that was mooted was a Canada plus. That wouldn't work for us either, because it doesn't include services, which represents a massive proportion of our economy. So Canada wouldn't work for us. We need to have something very specific for us. Geneva, they said, how long do you think it will take? And they said anything from 8 to 10 years before you get a trade deal with the European Union, because you've got 750 treaties to negotiate. And when you negotiate a trade agreement between two countries, you generally start in different places. So you've got different regulations, different rules, different standards, and as over that 5, 6, 7, 8 year period, you're actually negotiating yourselves closer and closer to each other. So you've got similar standards, similar regulations, everything else. So the problem the UK have got is you're starting in exactly the same place right now. You've got the same standards as the European Union. And what you're saying to them is during those next few years, what you want to be able to do is move away from there, so that you can change your standards, so you can sign new trade deals with other countries around the world, which are different standards to the European Union. He said that's why it's going to be really, really hard for Britain to be able to get a trade deal with the European Union at any time, certainly not within the transition period, and that's all the time we've got. And then he said, well, okay, well, you just roll over all these other ones. And they said, other countries won't. They'll want to know what your relationship is with the European Union before they start negotiating with you. Because if I'm going to build a car factory here in Saffron Walden, create loads of jobs and everything, I want to know that I can sell that product back into the European Union, tariff-free or friction-free. If I don't know what the tariffs are going to be, I'm not making that investment in Britain. So I'm going to wait until I know what the trade agreement looks like in the future. So we're probably a long way away from even starting to discuss Norway, Canada plus, and the 26 pages of this future relationship that we've got with the European Union just mean nothing. 26 pages is ridiculous. These trade agreements are tens of thousands of pages long. Even the little tiny one with Singapore was relatively straightforward. That's like 9,000 pages in that one. Switzerland spent 10 years negotiating 120 separate agreements with the European Union, and then they went, ooh, this isn't really working for us. Can we negotiate a new, full, comprehensive free trade agreement? And they spent the next 10 years negotiating that. Switzerland, a tiny trading company like Switzerland. Imagine what it'd be like for us.
Angela?
Yeah, this is probably a bit retrospective as a question. I just wondered to what extent you think that the general public ignorance about the extent to which the EU has assisted us in regional and developmental things altogether has contributed to the whole mess, and whether in fact members of Parliament, as you've been speaking to them, actually still understand that or not. I mean, no one is talking about this. No one talked about it before Brexit. And, you know, if we go on the continent, you saw these big notices that say this was built with the assistance of the European Union all over the place. And there are areas where we've had quite a lot of that support, but no one seems to know anything about it. You know, it's the what has the EU ever done for Flint or something? Someone once asked us. You know, a lot is the answer to that. I mean, I just wondered to what extent.
I did a blog back in 2016 March time called "Get the Brexit Facts" at WordPress. It's on one of the WordPress blogs. And I went on the EU, looked at all the funding that came across. You know this new Port or Stronger Towns Fund that Theresa May's just announced, £1.6 billion? Do you know how much we used to get from the European Social Fund and the European Structural Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the European Structure Fund and the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility that's extended the M4 in Wales? £4 billion a year. And she's replacing that £4 billion a year with 1.6 billion spread over 6 years. Just ridiculous. But I did a lot of analysis on the European Social Fund, which works with the third sector in the UK, like charities, adult education, colleges, and they get match funding. And you think the third sector can't live without that, because the third sector, charity sector, they don't have enough cash already. When you take away their ability to get match funding from the EU,
it's quite hard to get that information to the general public.
Yeah,
if I Google it, you dig very hard to get
it took me a while to write those posts. I think there's about 60 different posts on my blog, Get the Brexit Facts, all one word, at wordpress.com. You'll find it on there. And I did the CEF and then listed all the different areas in the country that it was and how much they've received and what the money was spent on in those areas. So yeah, the CEF, it's a bunch of them, I can't remember what they are. I haven't looked at it for a couple of years.
Evening. You're amongst friends here. How do we convince people that voted leave? I was the only person in my workplace that voted to remain, as far as I know. How do we convince those people who are now insistent, as much as anything, we need to get out, that that's not the thing we should be doing?
It's a really good question, and I get asked that a lot. And the best person to answer that is Femi. You know, Femi. He is an absolute hero at that sort of stuff. I just want to slap levers around the head. I beat it into them, but they're wrong. But I don't think that's approved of very widely.
Caroline Lucas is the mother of this.
She's also very good.
I've seen her in watercolours.
So
can I just finish this one if I may? Because we don't need them.
Right.
Okay, in this people's vote, the second vote that we get, or confirmation vote, whatever you want to call it, because the swing between Leave and Remain was 685,000 votes. That was the swing from Remain to Leave, and that's what gave them the win. Right. Bear in mind that the Remain campaign, the Strong Green campaign, was crap. Right. It's one of the worst political campaigns I've ever seen in my life. Really, and we still got 48%. They had to lie, cheat, steal, and get foreign influence just to get to scrape over that 50% mark. Okay, so first of all, 685,000 was the swing. 2016, over 1.8 million youngsters have now turned 18, and they are 70% of those are more likely to vote to Remain than to Leave. So you add, and not only have they turned 18, over 1 million of them have registered on the electoral register to be able to vote in the next referendum, specifically. So you've got another 1 million potential votes, or maybe 700,000 votes on there. Over 800,000 older people are no longer on the electoral register. I think that's the least tactful way of saying it. Older people were 70% more likely to vote Leave. So just on the demographics, if we repeated the vote, even with all their lies and us not even bothering to campaign, the demographics will swing it for us. So even if it just gave us 10% of the Leavers onto us, that takes us from 48% to 58%, and takes them from 51% to 41%. Imagine if we did a phenomenal campaign, like this lady was just saying, and telling people what the European Union has done for the country. A positive campaign that tries to unify people. In the Leave areas, they're the ones that receive most of the European funding. So you can do it that way as well. But I think on the demographics we'll win if we run a positive campaign and talk about real things that the EU have been doing, And we need to get some fact checkers out there, get the numbers out there, get the regions out there. And there's a lot of groups around the country now, there's over 1,000 EU groups, pro-EU groups now. And they're out doing street stalls every week in the Brexit offices. You've seen them everywhere. And they are out there getting the message out. But you don't need all of the levers. You really only need 10% of them. And the hardcore bottom 20%, don't even waste your time talking to them. Yeah. The next one's up, maybe. And then you've got the others that go, do you know what? The NHS isn't getting £350 million a week anymore. And Turkey's not joining the EU. And the EU army's not going to conscript our kids for national service. And those ones have already caught on to the fact that they were lied to. And they are angry with the likes of the Boris Johnsons, the Michael Gaves, the Farages, the David Davises. And there's a lot of very angry leaders out there that are now absolute remainers.
What would you say to the theory that we've got a parliament of 600 grant MPs, of which a reasonable proportion are intelligent and understand what you've been telling us tonight, but they haven't got the guts to actually make a decision, the right decision, and they're waiting on somebody else to rescue them from the hole that they've got into?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the 650 MPs, I mean, I call them incompetent cowards lying unintelligent. First time I was in the Daily Express. But yeah, they are incompetent. They really are. And MP's job description is to first act in the national interest, the interest of the nation. Secondly, to act in the interest of his constituents. And thirdly, to act in or her constituents. And thirdly, to act in the interests of their political party they represent. And they've got it completely upside down. Yeah, the Tories just worry about the Tories, how they'll look, how can they keep the party together without splitting. Jeremy Corbyn's got his own problems. The Liberal Democrats seem to be the only ones that have been consistent all the way through and united, well, apart from the odd one. Two, Stephen and Norman. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. They're not doing the jobs that we pay them for. And I don't know whether they're having a revolution. Simply find a Guy Fawkes to burn the building down and start afresh. When I take over from Vince Cable and I'm running the country, it's going to be a very, very different animal.
Gentleman at the front here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been on a lot of stores and actually talked to a lot of people. I can think of when I was on them first, say 18 months ago, people then were still actually believing a lot of the Leave lies. But that's all faded away now. But what people really come back to is we've already voted. So it comes back to there's very few. Or occasionally I get some people saying, oh, it may be difficult for a few years, but we'll come up again. Well, that's quite an easy one to come back to say, well, who's going to lose the job? Is it your son or your grandson or whoever, judging on the age of the person? But it mainly comes back to the fact is we've already voted. That's the point. We've made our choice. It's democracy. That's the one. And it was only two and three-quarter years ago. There's a huge passage of time between it. That's the one that's actually difficult to respond to.
And even some Remainers come out of that.
Yeah, and Remainers come out of that, that's true.
They voted in a criminal election. They didn't vote in a fair, free, democratic vote at all, in any way. Ask the National Crime Agency, ask the Met Police, ask the criminal investigations that have done. That was not a democratic vote. And what we want is a democratic vote that's fair, free, open, free of criminality, that's fair, whether with postal vote company that counts the postal votes wasn't bought, the IT company that was doing the counting and stuff before, wasn't bought by a hardcore leaver a few months before the actual referendum itself, where postal votes didn't go missing, thousands and thousands of them, where people were told they were sent postal votes abroad, and they weren't allowed to vote. How is that democratic? None of that vote in 2016 was democratic, not any of it. Yes, when we added up the numbers at the end, was there more leavers than the Remainers? Who knows, because we don't know how many votes were missing. Honestly, it was a criminal act. And it's not me just saying that, because all of the main groups have already been prosecuted successfully by the Electoral Commission. Every single one of them, including Stronger In. They all overspent. They all broke the law. And you think, how is that democratic? And okay, so let's have a democratic vote then. If you like democracy that much, let's have one.
I'm going to take 3 more questions. You up for that, Jason?
Yeah.
Then Melvin, then gentleman at the front.
Okay, I'll go first with a kind of tactical question in a way. I'm very active campaigning, and I was appalled in the referendum at how disorganised the In campaign, the Remain campaign was. It was a shambles from start to finish. Things have improved, but I would hate to have to start fighting another referendum campaign with the organisation that the Remain campaign has got.
If it helps at all, there are regular meetings now that weren't taking place before in Europe House in Westminster, but generally organised by the People's Vote. And in there, I think you've got maybe 24 different campaign groups, and they're trying to get on the same page and have some sort of coordinated message to go out. I don't know, I've been to a couple of meetings. I'm not completely sold that we have the kind of organisation that you're asking for.
Yeah. And how are they liaising with the political parties, for example? I know that the Lib Dems are very strong supporters of this vote, obviously, and there are considerable numbers of Tories even and Labour members who would like to be campaigning for that.
Absolutely, I've been on panels with Labour Conservative MPs and myself, and Lena Moran was at one of the People's Vote things.
But political parties are not really integrated with the Remain campaign for the People's Vote.
I think they're afraid for the reasons that we're saying earlier. They're afraid they want somebody else to stand up and put their head above the parapet. And that's what I was saying to one of the Lib Dem Lords yesterday, was we need to be that person that puts our head above that parapet in the House of Commons, on record, on Hansard, to say, look, we have to revoke Article 50. We've got to do it between now and the 21st and the next EU Council meeting. Or we have the People's Vote. We've got to do that, but we can't be faffing around like all the others. We've got to take the lead on this. And as I say, the message hopefully we'll get to Vince fairly soon.
Ken Clark's around.
Ken Clark's a Liberal. He just doesn't know it.
Okay. Who's next? Melvin.
Bearing in mind Theresa was in Grimsby today, can you tell me what you think the advantages to the UK of repatriating fisheries policy is going to be to Grimsby?
Grimsby, they were the ones that voted to leave, and then after they left they said, yeah, but we still want to be in this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit, when they realised what they'd actually done. Theresa May's up there and she's all over the place again. There's within the last couple of weeks, she's been saying, look, if you don't vote for my deal, then all that's left is no deal, and we crash out over the cliff. Today, she's saying, well, if you don't vote for my deal, then we might never leave the EU. But then she said Brexit belongs to Britain, not just the members of Parliament. And I'm like, nothing to do with me, Governor, you can keep for that one. But the fisheries policy, I mean, how do you... I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but there's a significant majority of the fish that are caught by British fishermen are landed in the European Union and sold into the European Union, because we don't eat the fish that swim around our coast. Because the Europeans like to eat the fish that swim around our coast. So where are we going to land them? In Grimsby, we'll be dead in the water, because at the moment, fish that are landed in Grimsby and processed and put into cans or whatever, they're then shipped out the country tariff friction-free to the European Union without any sanitary or phytosanitary veterinary checks, all of which will be necessary. Now the interesting thing is, from Grimsby they go across to Rotterdam, and Rotterdam doesn't have any of these veterinary check things they need, so they have to have a whole new ferry route in. Maybe we could hire a company that's got no boats.
Last question.
Well, actually, I was hush you, cover your ears, but you're falsely modest. I saw you tackle some levers outside Parliament. I think it was on the day of the big vote and the big defeat. To paraphrase it to Mark earlier, and you were engaged with the bloke and this woman on the other side. And he eventually said something along the lines of, oh, you've got these arguments very well rehearsed. And I think she said, yeah, he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he? And there was actually a moment of realisation in that conversation. The difficulty is getting them to take the next step and convert that into an acceptance that they were wrong. And that's a real burden.
That lady was carrying around a Let's Go WTO poster. And I saw her several times more that day, and passed her on the street, and she put it down, and she wasn't carrying it anymore. The other guy who, I ended the conversation with this guy, I was there for, I think maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, it's on YouTube, and the guy says, look, it doesn't matter what you say. He said, I'd rather eat grass than stay in the European Union. And I said, at that point, this conversation's over. I mean, seriously, I'd rather eat grass. I'm like, wow, you're going to make me eat grass, everybody else eat grass. But yeah, it's like we talked about WTO, we talked with them, and it was actually filmed by a lever. And they posted it on YouTube thinking that that guy beat me in the discussion because he said he'd rather eat grass. That was the ending of the debate or the discussion. And they posted it on YouTube, and then of course Remainers got a hold of it and downloaded it and re-uploaded it. So it's quite widely watched. It's called the I'd rather eat grass video.
Is your crowdfunding page still open?
It is, but I paused it for the moment because I don't know what's happening next. I really don't. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next month. I've been chasing around the country. We've had the crowdfunder itself has raised nearly £50,000 since October. I've been absolutely gobsmacked and overawed with the level of support that people have been contributing. Whether it's £5 here, £10 there, £100 here. Hugh Grant, the actor, put £2,000 in to keep me going because he and I talk on Twitter, direct messaging. He's a very cool guy. He's going to do a 3 Blokes in the Pub with us when he gets back from La La Land. He's filming 2 movies at the moment, so when he comes back, we're going to do one talking about the press and the influence of the press over the Brexit. So that'll be a good one to do.
Well, you look like Jeremy Thorpe.
I'm not so sure. I mean, there's a few other 3 Blokes in the Pub that we want to do, but we're still trying to just fit calendars and everything together at the moment. It's really hard. We want to do 3 Blokes and a Dragon, so we've been talking to Deborah Meaden. We want to do 3 Blokes and a Rocket Scientist, so we're talking to Professor Brian Cox and his team. So we're talking to some of the bigger Remainers, but we'll see how we get on with this. So yeah, I mean, I've been overawed with the level of support. I had a big donation from somebody outside the UK, separate to the crowdfunder, which has covered my mileage, covered lots of targeted social media advertising on LinkedIn, on Twitter and Facebook. We've been doing basically what the Leave campaign did, with targeted adverts, but without stealing people's data, clearly. We spent a significant amount of money targeting these people, and we've been reaching over 4 million leavers a month since November last year. So the sort of stuff, and I love it that Remainers don't know this is going on, because it means the target is working. And the guy we've got doing the targeting used to work with the Leave campaigns and that crowd and did the targeting for them, but he's now a Remainer, so he's been helping out. We've been paying him to do some work for us too. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of lobbying going on in the House of Lords, and there's a lot of lobbying going into members of Parliament, but the MPs are just so scared about losing their jobs, and they just will not stand up and be counted. And I think if anybody should be, it should be us.
Right.
So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think the fact of the matter is that the confident way in which you speak and the knowledge which you bring to everything that you tell us gives a lot of us in this room a great deal of hope. That there is at least somebody out there who has a good grasp of what's going on and what might possibly be possible to be done about it. So I think it's, although it's a dire situation, you've, as I say, given us more hope this evening. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable evening listening to you.
Thank you very much.
I've looked around the room and I've seen at some points during your talk people looking absolutely devastated about some of the things that you've suggested that are likely to happen. I myself employ a young Italian architect who works for me, and she said to me one day, she said, I would like your help to understand what's going on. I could try. And she said, every time I look at newspapers or listen to the radio and watch the television, people are saying how we're not welcome in this country and how we should leave. And yet, she said, when I meet people in Saffron Walden, they're always welcoming, always nice, and I've never met anybody who's even suggested that I should leave the country. And there is this huge mismatch between the media presentation fueled by the right wing and what actually happened. And I think we need to remember that. That also is something that we should give us hope for the future. Because I think we can win this. I know you have reservations, but I'm sure that we can, because I think people will see through the lies and the disinformation which they've been given by those people who really should know better.